Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Art Is You podcast. I'm your host, Carly Scott, and this week we are talking about surrendering to the unknown. Big topic to cover, a big juicy one. So, surrendering to the unknown, the reason I wanted to talk about this today is because I was trying to think about like first steps in a healing journey. What might someone be struggling with or maybe needing help with to either start their healing journey, or even if you're on a healing journey. I feel like surrendering to the unknown is something that like any step of the way is helpful to like have that reminder, but especially when you're just getting started with something brand new, whether it's a healing journey or a project or a business or anything you're trying for the first time, surrendering to the unknown can be a really scary and important part of the process to get started on something brand new. So today we're just going to kind of talk about what it even means to surrender to the unknown and things that can help you surrender to the unknown, things that have helped me surrender to the unknown. And actually, like, you can even find excitement and, excitement of like endless possibilities when you think about surrendering to the unknown, okay? So it can actually be a really wonderful thing, but it's also a really scary thing. And if you're easily scared like me, the unknown is like a very terrifying thing also. So, of course, I talked with my chat GPT, and I'm just going to say chat from now on moving forward because I hate saying the whole thing. It feels like a mouthful to me for some reason. So we're just saying chat from now on moving forward. So I asked chat what surrendering to the unknown meant to them. I don't really know if chat's like a girl or a boy. I don't know. So I'm going to say them. Okay? So this is what chat said. Hey, to me, surrender to the unknown means letting go of the need for control and embracing uncertainty with trust. It's about accepting what you won't always have, it's about accepting that you won't always have the answers, but instead of resisting, you lean into the mystery with openness. There's a sense of freedom in it, releasing fear, expectations, or the need to map everything out, allowing life to unfold as it will. It can be terrifying, but also deeply transformative. Like stepping into the dark and realizing you don't need to see everything to move forward. Okay. So, that was kind of a long-winded way of saying everything I was thinking in my head. But I love how chat just will like help me put into words these concepts that I am thinking about constantly. But I feel like that did a pretty good job of describing like the fear behind the unknown, and how the way to surrender to the fear is to almost be willing to like shift your perspective around fear and how we think about the things that we don't know, because we always have a choice of how we view things, right? And because there's a choice and there's different ways to view things, the unknown by nature, you don't know what it is, right? Like, you don't know because it's unknown. I don't know how else to describe it besides using the word to describe it, but if you don't know and you have to conjure up something in your mind to try to protect yourself or whatever it is, right? Like, we are creatures of survival. Like, we're afraid of things because we want to protect ourselves and stay alive and all that stuff, and we don't want to get hurt. So the unknown can be scary for that reason, because if you don't know what it is, like, it could be good, but it could be bad. And we're really scared that it could be bad, and it could be the bad thing. So that's usually what we choose to focus on, or at least for me, that's my tendency, is to focus on the bad, because I think somehow I'm protecting myself by focusing on the worst case scenario. I think that's somehow preparing me for the worst case scenario and going to save me somehow if that worst case scenario happens, because I thought about it ahead of time, I was prepared. But the reality is, in my experience and what I've heard from other people who are probably a lot smarter, more experienced than I have with life, have said that if you worry about something, it actually does not help prepare you. It actually makes you more stressed out, less able to think clearly, and in that situation maybe like less likely to act the best way possible in that worst case scenario, if you are super stressed and worried about the outcome, versus if you're able to have a little bit more of like a calm, grounded approach, you will be able to maybe make some better decisions in that worst case scenario situation and not just add to the problem and make it worse. And if you worry about something and it doesn't happen, then it's just kind of like you were worrying about the worst case scenario and putting yourself in all of that stress by worrying about it, and then it didn't even happen. So you're really not using that to help you in any way. It actually kind of hurt you because you spent a lot of time stressing about it. And I do this so much, you guys. Worry about the unknown, the future, things that are out of my control, and it really keeps me stuck and stresses me out, because if I'm constantly thinking the worst case scenario could possibly happen and think I have to prepare myself for the worst case scenario all the time, I am going to be hyper stressed out. And I've spent a lot of my life hyper stressed out like that, just trying to protect against any worst case scenario possibility. And you know, you don't need to beat yourself up if you do this. I sometimes beat myself up because I think it's bad that I haven't figured this out yet. But in reality, if you struggle with this, you probably, you know, grew up in a situation where you had to be aware, and maybe there were reasons for you to be on edge or scared or feel like things are out of your control, and you can't, you know, you have to kind of be hyper vigilant, I guess, all the time. And so that's why it's important to be compassionate with yourself and be kind with yourself, because even though it's annoying that you're stressed out all the time, worried about the unknown, worried about the future, worried about things you can't control, that's annoying. But instead of beating yourself up for like recognizing that, I think it's important to give ourselves compassion for like the reason we had to develop that in the first place, and that, yeah, we can be kind to ourselves. We don't have to like add on to the stress that we're already under by then beating ourselves up. Like, why are you so stressed out? And like, why are you causing all this unnecessary stress for yourself? Like, just be like, oh, like, I see why you're doing that. This is really hurting us. So, and I think there's actually a better way. Let's try that. Like, just be gentle with yourself. I don't know. Like, I try to think of it like a younger version of myself that was experiencing this like stress and anxiety, and like how as an adult I would try to like guide them through that, as far as validating their feelings, letting them know it's okay that they feel that way, and that it's actually very normal to be like stressed and overwhelmed about things you can't control. These are emotions we have to deal with as people on this planet. So it's like, how can I validate that for that younger version of myself? Validate her feelings, which, you guys, I'm doing this to myself. Sometimes when I'm talking to my husband about like my younger self or whatever, and I'm like saying her, he's like, this is tripping me out. Like, why are you saying her? Like, it's you. And I'm like, okay, but I'm gonna say her because that's how it makes sense to me when I talk about it. But essentially, I'll validate her feelings, and I will also just try to comfort her and give her the wisdom that like I've learned now as an adult that she didn't have back then. So like, validate her feelings and just comfort her that like, I understand what you're going through, and like, I have been there before, and here's like what I know now. And the here's what I know now part is just me reminding myself what I already know, you guys, what I've learned, which is that worrying about this is actually just hurting you, and you don't actually need to spend all of this energy hedging against the worst case scenario. And giving myself permission to let that go, and letting her know, like, we've actually had experience with this, and this takes us down like kind of a destructive path. But if you're able to release the unknown, surrender, release it, whatever, if you're able to do that and just say, hey, I don't know, like, I don't know what's gonna happen. Like, the worst case scenario is technically a possibility. And that used to really mess with my head because I was like, well, it's possible. Even if it's a 0.00001% chance that it's going to happen, that tiny percent possibility that it could happen would destroy me. And I would just let that consume me, like, but like, this bad thing could happen. So like, like, I just would freak out. So I feel like I literally have to tell myself, you guys, that like, this is not helpful. And when I'm able to surrender it and just say, I don't know what's gonna happen. Yes, that worst thing might happen. You can even be like, what's gonna happen if that worst case scenario happens? You know? In some cases, the situation is me dying because I'm scared of that happening or whatever. But the reality is, we're all gonna die, and I'm gonna die anyway. And that's honestly really helped me release that, because like, it feels so out of my control. And also, like, what is guaranteed is we're all gonna die. Like, that is guaranteed, you guys. We're all gonna die. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to say it, but so that has really helped me with that, because that's one of those worst case scenarios that like, we can't avoid it, you know? And then also, of course, like, losing people you love, or just like a really terrible accident happening, like things happening in the world. Like, there's so many things that like feel like they're the worst case scenario unfolding currently, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. So I guess, and honestly, in some ways this has helped me, because in my personal life, I think in some ways worst case scenarios did happen, and honestly in like ways that I hadn't even imagined. Like, I thought I had a pretty creative imagination for like worst case scenarios, but apparently not, because things in life are just bad, you guys. Like, bad things can happen, and we all experience terrible darkness on this planet. And something I've really thought about over the last few years is, it is traumatic to be a human. It's if you just think about, like, okay, I used to have this attitude, and I know a lot of people have this attitude of like, oh, like, that person's never experienced trauma, or like, oh, they don't know what it's like to struggle, they've had it so easy. And like, yes, of course, there is a very wide spectrum of this, you guys. very wide, very, very wide and vast. Some people do have it like so much miles beyond better than other people. And so that's true. Absolutely. But something I've realized, you guys, that has made me so compassionate towards other people, like just everyone, is, okay, thinking about like the act of being born into the world. Okay? Just the act of being like born is kind of traumatic when you think about it. Like, obviously we don't remember being born, but just like being a person and like having to go from like being inside a body to being like out into the world, and you're just like this like weird like flesh body animal thing that's just born, and then you're just in the world crying, like breathing air, and like being a human is just like painful and uncomfortable sometimes. And like, you know, babies just crying all the time of like getting hungry, needing to go to the bathroom, just having all of these physical needs to meet. And then you add on top of that just like the experiences we have as a kid of like having our feelings hurt, or just feeling like not seen or loved or cared for in certain ways, or having your heart broken for the first time. Just like all of these almost universal experiences that everybody has to some level, right? Like, we all have to be like born, and we all have to have these human bodies that are just like imperfect and uncomfortable a lot of the time for most of us, even if we're relatively healthy. I don't know, like and I'm not, like, right now I'm very comfortable, so I shouldn't be like, I know there's people in a lot more uncomfortable positions than me. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's just hard for everyone to be here. We're just trying to figure it out. We're trying to live. We're trying to survive and like experience this life, and we're all just figuring it out for the first time. Anyways, I feel like I'm on a tangent. Hopefully you guys are following. But it's important to validate yourself for these reasons. Like, we can spend all day saying, like, I haven't experienced trauma, like, people have it way worse than me, like, I shouldn't give myself compassion, I should just beat myself up because people have it way better than me, and I shouldn't spend a second, like, complaining or worried when people are actually in danger. Like, I do this to myself all the time, and I think part of it is because when I was younger, that's like a lot of the messaging I got was that like my feelings were kind of invalidated by the fact that other people were always going through something worse than me. And so like I just learned to kind of not validate my own feelings, I guess, and just do the same thing with myself that other people would do, which is just remind myself that other people have it worse, and I just need to like push through and not really acknowledge what I'm going through. And so I just really want to encourage other people that they are allowed to do the same. You are allowed to acknowledge your feelings, even if your whole life you were told to push them down and that someone else was going through something worse. So don't focus on yourself or whatever it is. Like, I want to be the opposite voice to you of like, no, you're allowed to feel that, you're allowed to look at it, you're allowed to sit with it, and you're allowed to have compassion for yourself and talk nicely to yourself when you are sorting through these things. When you are doing this for the first time, it is really difficult. And I still struggle with beating myself up. And then I have to catch myself mid self-destruction mode. And I have to be like, oh, whoa, like, we don't do that anymore. And I'm still doing that, and I've been doing this work for like years now, and so it is really hard when you're first starting it, and it can be really discouraging. And again, not everyone's like this, but if you're anything like me, your instinct will be to beat yourself up and to continue doing that, and it will be work and it will take consistent work to fight that urge and to start to let your more wise, caring, and compassionate self step forward and be the one to really like take over in those situations and be the voice of reason, the voice of kindness, the voice of compassion for all people. Okay, like let that version like step in and take charge. And if you didn't have someone that was that voice growing up, you are literally learning how to create that for yourself, because the voice in your head is the voice telling you that these feelings aren't valid and that your pain doesn't matter and that you're actually bad and wrong for letting yourself feel and acknowledge your pain and giving time and space for it. They will the voice, my internal voice makes me feel guilty for that and bad for that. But my compassionate, mature adult self sees the importance of that and sees the value in that and sees actually like the feelings are so valid, it's insane. Like, it's insane how valid they are. And so, like, I want to validate other people. Like, it is insane how valid your feelings are. And it's insane how few people will, like, tell you that. Like, what? So, I'm telling myself that, and I'm telling you that. It is safe to surrender to the unknown simply because we have no other choice, you guys. Simply because the unknown is the unknown, whether we want it to be the unknown or not. And so you can resist it and be afraid of it and terrified of it and be in distress about it, or you can be open to it, curious about it, curious about the possibilities of what exists in the unknown. Because if you think about it, it's the unknown, right? In my mind, that's like endless possibilities, because like as I've grown older and experienced more of the earth, it's like, oh, there's these like things that exist that I didn't even know existed, or ideas or people or traditions or concepts, ways of living. There's been so many things I didn't even know existed that I've learned. Like, that's just part of being a human. Like, you get here and then you're like, you have this small world, and then it just expands and you see more and you understand more. You experience more life, and there's so much. And so when you think about the unknown, yes, there is scary things you could focus on in the unknown, or there's really exciting and wonderful things you could focus on, as far as what other wonderful things are out there. Because I have learned and found and experienced so many cool, new, wonderful things I didn't even know existed before. And I just know there's way more of that out there. I also know the same for the other side, like the dark side, right? Like, I've also experienced really like hard things that I didn't think I would experience or know would be an experience that people experience. Like, I've just become more aware of like how much bad there is in the world too, and how much horrible stuff. So that also shows me that in the unknown, there's probably a lot of bad things that I don't know about, and that's really scary. So because that unknown just exists and we just don't have a choice about whether it does or not, we do have a choice on what we focus on. And so in the current state of the world, I feel like a lot of people, rightly so, very valid for feeling this way, are in fear of the future. And I would be lying if I said like I don't have fear for the future, because that stuff's scary. So I'm just like working to do what I can to stay in that space of openness, surrender, and I guess just like excitement, curiosity, and hopefulness for the unknown good possibilities. Because something I've learned over the last few years is that where I put my focus, my energy, and my attention, whatever that is, whether it's good or bad, right? That thing grows. And so if I decide, even while the world is falling apart, to choose to focus on the unknown possibilities of good and excitement and just like, yeah, like more goodness for everyone. Like I get to choose what I want to focus on when it comes to the unknown, and what kind of like world I want to imagine for myself, for other people, how I want to feel, and how I want to make other people feel. That is what I have control over. And so I guess I just want this episode to be an encouragement for anyone who is struggling right now with the unknowns of the future, the unknowns of the world, of your business, of anything that you're working on that feels unknown and scary. The goal we can have together is maybe to focus on what we want to create and the exciting possibilities that might come out of the unknown moving forward. And I think we have a little bit of control over that, right? Because if you have control over yourself, you have control over how you show up, and the outcomes, results of your life will look different based off of how you show up. So I know that's a tiny thing you can control. It's so small because the world is so big. There's so many people and so many things, and you're just one person. But I just stuttered a little bit there. But like, your experience of your life is your whole life. Like, not to someone else. Like, I'm looking out my car right now and I see people walking on the street, and it's like, I'll never meet them. I'll never know what's going on in their life, but their life is their whole world and their whole experience. My life is my whole world and my whole experience, and so is yours. And so if you make this change for yourself, you might be like, oh, but it won't really change anything. It won't change the world. It will change your whole world and your whole life and your whole experience. And that is what I'm like learning right now. I'm just like trying so hard, because I always forget this, you guys. And then I start like looking outside of myself for like something else to change my life, something to like come in and save me, or like something to happen in the world to like save me, or just anything to like fix the world or save us or something. But you guys, like, you don't have control over that or what's outside of you. And like, I have to remind myself this every day, multiple times. But like, I just have control over me. But that is huge, because that is my whole experience and my whole world. I don't know if I'm rambling. Okay, the last thing I wanted to chat about was just a few tips that chat gave me for if you are struggling with surrendering to the unknown. So, here's some tips. Number 1 is reframing uncertainty. Instead of seeing the unknown as something to fear, try viewing it as a space for possibility and growth. Ask yourself, what exciting things could come from this? So, I mean, I feel like I kind of already said that, but yeah, just shifting that perspective to the exciting possibilities. And as terrible as it is, you guys, like, we've already experienced some really bad things. Like, COVID was pretty bad, and a lot of horrible things happened. A lot of horrible things came from that, but also a lot of like good and positive things came out of that for people, whether it be in like indirect ways or whatever, whether it was just in helping them with connecting with themselves or like realizing something about themselves. Like, sometimes when bad things happen, positive possibilities can come out of it. And again, I don't say this to invalidate or undermine the bad things that will come out of it, because I think we should validate that and experience that and have compassion for that too, because it's all real, it's all valid. And yeah, so but when it comes to the unknown and not knowing what comes next, if you want to get out of that place of fear, the best way to do that is to focus on the possibilities instead of, or the positive possibilities instead of like the scary ones. Number 2 is grounding practices. Things like deep breathing, which you already do. Oh yeah. Chat like saves memory or whatever, so it like gets to know you. Anyways, movement, journaling, or meditation can help calm the mind when uncertainty feels overwhelming. And I feel like we chatted about that in the last episode with regulating my nervous system. It's all connected, you guys. It's all connected. Number 3, focusing on the present. When future worries creep in, gently bring yourself back to what's real and tangible right now. Your breath, your surroundings, what you can control in this moment. Love that. Yeah, very helpful. I feel like, again, I need to turn the heater down in the car because I'm getting so warm. Whenever you're able to acknowledge your current, in this moment, circumstances, especially when you're fearing the future and the unknown, if you're able to come to terms with the present moment as far as being safe, and again, we talked about this in the last episode, but if you're not actually safe, that's a completely different situation. But if you are safe in the present moment, that can be a really good way to like ground yourself, focus on now where you are safe, and that can kind of take the focus away from the fear of the future and bring you back to like the safety you have right now. And then try to approach the unknown from that space of safety and be like, okay, I'm safe now. How do I want to choose to think about the future right now moving forward? And where do I want to put my focus and energy? Number 4 is trusting yourself. Remember that you've navigated unknowns before and made it through. Even if you don't have all the answers, you have the ability to handle what comes your way. So, I love this. I want to do an episode about trusting yourself, because this is not a simple, or it's not an easy thing to learn how to do. Like, I really struggled with it and I still struggle with it, but I feel like I've made a lot of progress and come a long way as far as trusting myself goes. And so I think I want to do a separate episode just on that. And then number 5 is letting go of perfection. Surrender doesn't mean you have to be fearless. It just means being willing to move forward despite the uncertainty. It's okay to not have it all figured out. Okay, I love that point, because you don't have to be fearless, you guys. Moving forward despite having the fear doesn't mean you're fearless. It doesn't mean you don't have fear. It just means that you were scared and you did it anyway. It means you were brave, right? And I am a very scared person, but I also think I am brave in a lot of ways, because I will act on things despite having a lot of fear around them and being very scared. If I've come to a space of understanding within myself that that is an action I need to take moving forward, it feels in alignment and with in integrity with me and what I want to do, I will do that thing even if I'm scared shitless to do it. So I would encourage you to like build that muscle within yourself. I'm still building it. Like this is building that muscle for me, this podcast, of just feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And if you exercise that muscle, you'll realize that there's actually a lot of situations you're scared of that are maybe not as scary as you thought to begin with, and that you're actually capable of way more than you thought you were. So there's that. But yeah, I think that's all I have for today, you guys. I just wanted to kind of kind of throw out the concept of surrendering to the unknown. See what you guys think about it. Oh, one other thing I wanted to say too is that it's okay to not have all the answers, and to find out you're wrong about something, or something you thought you had the answer to that you don't actually have the answer to. That happens to all of us. That happens all the time in life, where you think you know something but then you don't, and you learn something new that like changes your mind or perspective. And you will never have all the answers, and it's okay to not have them, because nobody does, and anyone who's trying to tell you they have all the answers is lying to you, because no, they don't. Okay, that's all for today, you guys. I will talk to you next week. Love you. Bye.